they don't talk about risk enough, and they're not equipped to deal with risk enough. So I think it's part of that problem too. So let's very quickly sort of, these slides are dated 2013, but I think the point here is really what I want to make is that cyber insecurity, we can look at it in many different ways. We can look at it by cause. So this morning we heard about some of the latest trends in terms of the kinds of attacks that occur, the kinds of toolkits that are being used. So there's many different causes for cyber insecurity, malicious outsiders, all kinds of other things, malicious insiders, etc. Also, cyber insecurity knows no borders in terms of the kinds of companies and organizations that get hit. So you have everything from, the most hit are probably, at least historically, have been retail, financial, and technology companies, as well as government. But trends are also showing that many smaller, medium-sized companies are targets, and also that nonprofits and government agencies, clearly the biggest breach ever of employee records occurred with the US government agency. So there are no borders in terms of who is vulnerable. And you've probably heard this a million times, but I use it all the time, this quote from FBI director that there are two kinds of companies, those that have been hacked and those that don't know that they've been hacked. And so I think that's happening more and more, not just to the big companies, but some of the smaller and medium-sized companies. Cyber insecurity by organization. These are some of the headlines that all of you have probably been looking at. There's government agencies, banking institutions, healthcare. Ashley Madison is a recent case that broke an wide open case of an online cheating service, adultery service, where it's not clear yet who broke into the records, but some people think it might have been an insider who was disgruntled, and has revealed 30 million or so names of people who supposedly had accounts to commit adultery with others. So again, there's no demarcation line in terms of who gets hit. Also, by magnitude, we have all kinds of really big hits that we've seen over the years, and they're increasing dramatically from year to year. This is a Kaspersky Labs summary of what it costs. Average security breach is costing $551,000. Of course, if it's much bigger and you're a bigger organization, it's going to cost you a lot more, but this is the average. So the total average is 551, but then there's indirect spend on average of 69, and reputation damage, all the consequences that occur afterwards, of another 204,000. And here's a projection on cyber insurance to triple to $7.5 billion by 2020. So there's that whole other sort of series of industries that are developing around cyber security issues, including insurance. Reputation risk insurance is also developing, which is associated in some ways, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. So another thing that's happening, and clearly we had a great presentation just now from Dr. Ross about NIST and what they're doing, and they've provided a lot of very useful tools over the last few years that, there are a lot of private-public sort of collaboration that's taking place, which I think both speakers this morning talked about how important that is, because it is a team effort. It's not something where one company can quietly labor in its orchards and then, conquer this problem. So there are some very useful things that have been published by the government. They published recently some further guidance on what happens when an attack and some of the posture that the company should take and where they should go for help. So these are things that are very important. So the government is becoming much more proactive. They're also becoming proactive in a different way. So the FTC has kind of been the agency by default that kind of looks at these issues and creates some standards. And they published something a couple of years ago that provides some guidelines and some sort of best practices standards that companies should be following if they don't want to get into trouble with the government. And so there's a case from Wyndham that just came out recently where the FTC found that they had not maintained reasonable appropriate data security for their consumer information, that they had not created the appropriate security policies, provide the right oversight, employing reasonable measures to detect and prevent. And they didn't use the FTC's 2007 guidebook, which describes a checklist of practices. So what's happening here is a very interesting sort of trend, which coming from my background in risk and compliance, we saw this move, this kind of a trend happen in the past on compliance issues. And that is sort of the rise of a body of best practices, which may not be legally required. They're not laws, but they're best practices that then get applied by the courts potentially and by regulatory agencies reviewing situations. And so they then have an expectation of organizations that they will have these things in place. And if you don't, that's how you get into trouble, because maybe a cyber breach has happened or something else has happened. And the government will then say, well, you didn't have X, Y, and Z things in place. What do you expect? And so they'll hit them harder with a fine or some other kind of punishment, so to speak. So I think this is a really important development, too, that organizations, companies need to think about in terms of just beefing up their own voluntary systems of InfoSec and cybersecurity protections. So let me talk a little bit more about this paradox of the board not really being as prepared as it should be. Here is just a very general slide. Has nothing to do with cyber risk. It's a New York Stock Exchange survey that was done a couple of years ago, where they wanted to find out, if you believe there is not always appropriate time or focus given to risk discussions at your board meetings, what do you think is the cause? Why is this the case? And the most answer, 54%, answered that the board meetings are packed with so many other agenda items that the board doesn't have time to take a look. And this is the mantra I've heard for years and years. I used to report to boards. I've sat on a few boards. I counsel boards now. And risk is kind of the afterthought. Compliance is the afterthought. Now that cyber risk is coming in as such a dramatic potential risk, I think it's actually helped rise the whole risk management issue as well, even though there are other major risks that boards need to worry about. Reputation risk is one of them. But I think it's part of this wave of more awareness taking place at the highest levels of the organization. But they often say, I don't have time. I remember I was the head of audit and compliance for a company, and I would do quarterly reports to the board. And sometimes my 15 minutes got reduced to 5 minutes or 0 minutes because they didn't have time. And that's not a good thing if you want to have sort of the proactive tone from the top and budget and support. So I think this is an important piece of the puzzle of why we haven't seen more board support. This particular one is, why is cyber risk not on the agenda? This is from a Ponemon Institute research report that just came out in June of this year. I've got a number of tables from this particular study, which I think is great. They basically did surveys of many board of directors members and also many IT professionals, and it shows sort of the gap between the board and the IT community in terms of how they perceive the risk and how they perceive some of the issues. So this question goes to the point of why cybersecurity governance is not on your board agenda. Well, there's a very easy pat answer. 79% answered that it's management's responsibility. It's an easy way to sort of just say management needs to do that. Now, to the board's defense, management doesn't want to necessarily always bring up their issues and their risks if they think they have it under control, whether they do or not. So there's always a tension between management and the board on these kinds of things. But again, this is someone saying, or a bunch of people saying that it's not that important. Well, it's important, but management is taking care of it. So,
I'm good.
Yeah, okay. Good. So here's another one that kind of shows you the difference between the board of directors' reaction and the IT professionals. So the IT professionals are in red, and the board members are in blue. How knowledgeable are you about security, cybersecurity? The IT professionals say that they are very knowledgeable or knowledgeable. So about 81% of IT professionals, hopefully, are very knowledgeable or knowledgeable of cybersecurity issues. The board members say that they have, 9% say that they're very knowledgeable, and 24% say that they're knowledgeable. So again, we see that they are somewhat modest, that they don't know what they don't know. Some knowledge, 41%, minimal or no knowledge. So they're admitting that they're not really that knowledgeable. which is, I guess, good. It's the first stage in recognizing what you need to do, is knowing what you don't know. In this particular question, which is how effective are your organization's cybersecurity governance practices? The board of directors, again in blue. Let's see, the board of directors, let me just see quickly here. Okay, so very effective. The board of directors thinks 59%. The IT professionals, 18%. This is a huge gap. The board thinks everything is under control, we're good, and the poor IT professionals, 18%, think we're good. So again, there's a big disconnect between the two. In this next slide, the board members and IT security professionals, let's see, the question here is, our board recognizes the impact okay, so this is the issue of reputation risk. The board, 89%, recognizes that there is an impact on the reputation and marketplace value resulting from security breaches. So that's a good thing. They are recognizing that it has a major impact, potentially on the reputation of the firm and on the value in the marketplace. And they also believe that tone at the top is critical to achieving a strong security posture. So they believe the right things. Now we just have to get to the place where they're actually supporting and they're actually providing the guidance and the tone from the top. This one is another interesting sort of disconnect between the board and IT. Our board of directors understands the security risk to this organization. The board of directors, this is a combination now of the red says agree, and that's the IT professionals. And so if you combine 38% and 22%, that's about, 60%. So 60% of 70. 70? No, it's 60.
They call them board.
No, I'm looking at, so our board of directors understands the security risk to the organization. Strongly agree is in blue. I can't remember now. Now I'm stumped about this one. I remember I looked at it before. IT's on the, yeah, okay, so the total for the board, strongly agree is blue and agree is red. So the board, 60% of the board says that they do understand the security risks, but the IT people, it's only 43%. So again, there's another disconnect there between do you or don't you understand security issues, cybersecurity issues. So the point of all of this is just to sort of illustrate some of these disconnects. But I think the news is not all bad because we are really starting to see boards and C-suites take this issue more seriously. And I have a couple of slides later on that talk about why are they suddenly becoming more aware. And one of the reasons clearly is some of these really serious breaches that are making the headlines, Target being the biggest one in terms of impressing the boards that they have to get their act together. And so one of the things that I was doing when I was doing the research for this conference board paper that's coming out is I found some other materials that they had put together. And this is a quote from a group of CIOs and CISOs who basically have the right mentality for this issue, saying that it's not a technology issue, it's an operational, strategic infrastructure issue that requires sort of a cross-disciplinary approach. And this is something we heard about earlier this morning as well, which I think is a really critical piece of the puzzle. In this particular, so this is the slide I just mentioned, the Target data breach has had the greatest impact on board of directors sort of awareness of, OMG, we need to have a cybersecurity framework in our companies. Some of the Chinese spying in the Pittsburgh area, the JP Morgan case, and then some of the others, the Home Depot, the Sony PlayStation a couple of years ago, and some of the US government. These have all created awareness. And so one of the things I'll talk about in a few minutes in terms of the larger context in which we live in is that we're living in this age of hyper-transparency where nothing goes unsaid or untweeted or unposted. It's all out there, and it's out there in a moment's notice, basically. And so boards of directors are starting to see that, and they're starting to worry about their own reputations, the reputations of their companies and their own reputation, plus also their own liability. So as you start hitting the higher levels of the organization with more issues that have to do with their own reputation and their own personal standing and potential liability, then you start getting a higher set of awareness. And that's all good, I think, for purposes of developing more cybersecurity governance and and support within organizations. In this one, well, this one goes to the issue of personal liability. So are board members concerned about their potential liability if a company has a serious security incident? Well, look at that. 84% strongly agree or agree. So the personal incentive to think about this stuff is there. It's a very complicated set of issues, very challenging for those of us especially who are not engineers or technologists. But it's something they recognize, and so we have to take full advantage of the fact that their reputation and their personal liability is really important to them. And this is more or less agreement coming from the IT people in red. I'm sorry, the red was the IT people, the blue is the board of directors. So we have about 70, 30, 60, 69% board and 84% IT people. So we still have a little ways to go. So moving forward now in terms of talking about more directly about some of the board responsibilities, there are some materials that have been produced in the last couple of years, and really just in the last couple of years, on the board of directors' responsibilities, duties, to be proactive in overseeing the cybersecurity space. And the NACD, the National Association of Corporate Directors, produced a very good piece a couple of years ago, 2014 actually, just last year, in which they made some recommendations to boards of directors in terms of what they should be doing and thinking about. So you can see that they're basically making some very basic recommendations, that there has to be some form of enterprise risk management in your company, and that the IT security issue has to be part of that. That they need to have an understanding of the legal implications of cyber risk, privacy, data breaches, all these different things. They need to be apprised by their general counsels of their companies or outside experts of what the legal implications are. They should have adequate access to cybersecurity expertise. This is really important. If you don't have the right match of talent inside your organization with the kinds of cyber risks and other risks that you have, you're basically, shooting without bullets, I guess. And so that's very important as well. The directors also should set an expectation that management will establish an enterprise-wide cyber management framework for the organization, including staffing and budget. And then finally, the board management discussion of cyber risk has to include the identification of risks that are acceptable, that have to be mitigated or have to be completely eliminated, because as we learned certainly this morning, and all of you know, these issues are not issues that we can just find and eliminate. They constantly morph, they constantly change, and they pop up everywhere. So again, there has to be an ongoing discussion of what's acceptable risk versus what needs to be mitigated, what needs to be eliminated. So the piece that I mentioned earlier that I've authored for the conference board is coming out in 2 weeks. And basically what we tried to do here is kind of go a few steps further from some of the research that's already been done. And there hasn't been that much done. So what we tried to do is we wanted to see what the emerging trends are in cyber risk governance, meaning the top of the house. How are they managing this? And so we looked at 5 cases of cyber risk going wrong, the ones that you could probably guess: Target, Sony, JP Morgan, a couple of others. And then we also profiled 5 companies, 5 global companies who remain nameless. They're members of the conference board who were willing to offer open the kimono to us in terms of what their governance practices were, but it's always difficult in this space for people to be too open about this, but they were very open with us as long as we maintained their anonymity and just called them what they were, global Fortune 500 healthcare company or whatever. So we profiled 5 different companies who are, I think, either certainly up to speed or ahead of several companies or of companies in general around the world in terms of tackling cyber risk. And I'll share some of the takeaways that we had later in the presentation. So let's pan out for a moment and go to the big picture of what's going on in this world right now from a governance and risk management, compliance, political standpoint. We are living in the last 10 years or so in what I call the age of hyper-transparency in my book. but it's really just this incredible amount of information that's out there, the good, the bad, the ugly, the correct, the incorrect, the malicious, it's all out there. We have to sort of apply our filters of reason to understand what information is useful and not. But it started years ago with, for example, and this is just an example, Transparency International. Many of you are probably familiar with their work. They're a global anti-corruption NGO that's basically collected data over the years about perception of corruption. Now, this has nothing to do with cyber risk, but it's just an example of how the whole anti-corruption movement has gathered steam over the last 20 years. And they were part of the beginning of this, and now it's one of the biggest issues that companies deal with, certainly not on par necessarily with cyber risk in terms of its magnitude, but it's certainly very important to a lot of companies. And so with their work and a lot of the work that's evolved over the years, there's so much more light being shown on the corruption issue. There's a website, for example, in India called I Paid a Bribe, and anybody who's paid a bribe to a police person or a government official just to do something very simple, they can post it and that way complain about it. So we're living in that age where everything is out there. This is a notorious case of the social media. I don't know if anybody followed this case live. Some people did, some people didn't, but it's basically a woman who is the VP of PR of IAC, major media company here in the city. She was traveling to South Africa, and before she got on the plane, she tweeted something extremely racist and stupid. Going to Africa, hope I don't get AIDS, just kidding, I'm white. And what happened to this woman is she gets on the plane, a Twitter storm evolves while she's flying, and by the time she gets to South Africa, she's been fired. Now, there's lessons learned in there, right? I mean, first of all, you can't be this stupid and or racist and think you're going to get away with it. She got fired, so it shows that things happen in a nanosecond, but it also shows that this company actually was on top of its stuff. It had a social media feed, had good crisis management, decided we don't want someone like this representing us, and fired her. So it's a sort of lessons learned that we live in this age of super connectivity where everything is out there and people can, and it's sad because she may not be the criminal of all time. Her life is ruined in terms of any kind of gainful employment. So it's a sad story. It's not just a funny story. So also I like to use this slide just to sort of talk about mega risk and cyber is not in here, but it's in another one that I have right after this. This was a study that a bunch of Oxford scientists did, and the Financial Times published the results. And this is really sort of the doomsday scenario. This is existential mega risk. So I would just like to think about existential mega risk in connection with hyper-transparency and superconnectivity. We're living in a very, very dramatic world right now. And these may be small probabilities of happening, but these are the kinds of things that could doom our world. And it includes a global pandemic. Nanotechnology gray goo, does anybody know what that is? I mean, that's something where our space disappears because this thing replicates itself and we just lose everything. Extreme climate change, a supervolcano, an asteroid, artificial intelligence, that's one very related to cyber risk and cyber security issues. And there have been some very strong pronouncements recently from the likes of Stephen Hawking and Elon Musk about how scared they are that if that gets into the military machine, artificial intelligence could spell the end of the world in some ways because they might independently, the Terminator scenario comes to mind. So again, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but it's really the context that I want to give you of why we're in this kind of situation. Reputation risk is something that I think also really reflects our age, and it becomes really important with cyber risk too. I wrote this book last year, and I did it partly because I wanted to learn more and I try to push my thinking about this. But really what reputation risk is at the end of the day, at least in today's world, is a form of risk that is not really standalone. It attaches itself to another underlying risk. It could be, it could be corruption, it could be cyber, it could be fraud. What happens in today's age is because of the social media age and the hyper-transparency, these things hit much harder, much faster. Look at Volkswagen. And suddenly the reputation of the organization, or maybe its executives or others, really gets hit very hard, very soon, very tangibly actually. And there's an interesting study that someone has conducted of stock price impact of reputation risk. And they found on average that when a really bad reputation hit comes in, 7% of the stock value disappears, and then it takes time to build it back up. But if they do build it back up, and this is a point I'm going to make at the end about resilience building, if you build back the programs that you need to address the cyber risk or the other risks that you have, you actually create value, and you go above and beyond your loss of 7% to gain a net 13.5%. So that actually says to me, if you've built the programs, you will not have that kind of hit if something goes wrong, and you might be building value over time. So I think that's a really important thing to think about as you think about cyber risk as well. 7% average does not begin to account for the 40% drop, for example, that Volkswagen has just experienced, which is, to me, one of the unprecedented sort of evolving scandals that we've seen. But it doesn't have a cyber risk component, so I won't talk about it. At least we don't know it has a cyber risk component. It has a software component, so we'll see how that all evolves. The importance of reputation risk is that it really relates back to your stakeholders, and this goes back to if your target and your customer's data has been stolen and you didn't protect it properly, your reputation risk with your customers is going to be very high. They may not come back, and there's been some data that showed that in the case of Target. They lost store sales and some other things. So it's not just a stock price impact, there may be other financial impacts. So when you're thinking about risk, reputation risk associated with cyber risk or any other kind of risk, you need to think about who your stakeholders are. And if you go back again to Volkswagen, there's about 20 stakeholders that have been affected: customers, employees, the suppliers, the dealers who are now having to deal with all the car returns and repairs. So you have to think about the world as a world of stakeholders and the impacts of your not having the right protections in place, including cyber risk. Here's an example. This is a company that I actually have a strategic relationship with. They're called Rep Risk, and they do a media. Every day they scour the media around the world, and they create what's called a Rep Risk Index of most controversial companies, and it's an ongoing thing through the year that they do. And this is the 2014, and Neiman Marcus had a cyber incident. It was the number 10 most controversial company according to their analysis in terms of reputation risk last year. And it'll be interesting to see what happens this year. This is also another big picture thing that I really love to use whenever I talk about risk and global risk. And that is the World Economic Forum every year puts out a global risks overview. And again, it's a very big picture, but it's useful to companies, it's useful to organizations to see what's out there and what people consider to be some of the high impact, high likelihood risks that might occur. And if you look here under likelihood, the top most likely risk for 2015 was interstate conflict, extreme weather events. Well, number 10 is cyber attacks. And I wouldn't be surprised that that's going to move up quite a bit this next year for their 2016. If you look at risks in terms of their impact, in terms of the materiality and the pain that they might impart. Number 1, you have water crisis, which is a big issue for many countries, including our own in California, and also for corporations that rely heavily on water. So it's very high. Number 7 is critical information infrastructure breakdown. And that is, again, very much related to cyber risk, as we all know, and it's an area of great concern.
What's the difference between data fraud and cyber risk?
Data fraud. Oh, that's a good one. You're right. It could include privacy breach as well. Yeah. So cyber attacks would be just attacks in general, but in terms of what they get. Now, data fraud also, could be not cyber related. It could be hard copy. but you're right. I think I should amend that picture to include the 2 bottom ones. And this one is something that Allianz, the German insurance financial giant, they've put together also a yearly look, and this is from the insurance company perspective, what are the most important things that occupy or preoccupy business every year. And again, we have cybercrime, IT failures, and data breaches way up there. Number 5, right underneath it is loss of reputation and brand. And there's actually, I don't have a slide on this, but there was just published this week, Marsh, also an insurance company, they published a piece, some research that showed that reputation risk and cyber risk, as they relate to each other, are the most concerning risk for companies today. So it's very attached to each other because one feeds on the other, I would say. Here again, we have some views from the boardroom. This was a survey done a couple of years ago where, aside from financial risk, which of the following areas of risk management are most important to your boards? And the top one is rep risk, and the third one is cyber risk. So again, this just reinforces the points already made. This is just a further sort of iteration of that same survey, where they've broken it down between kinds of companies. So the public company, 64% concern, private company, 57%, and then the PE owned, and I don't know what NFP is. Does anybody know? Not for profit, thank you. I always think of it as NGO. Yeah, so 55, 55, 57, 64. This probably would go up quite a bit, since this is a 2-year-old survey. It would probably go up quite a bit in recent times. And again, one more from Aon, also an insurance company. Here they interviewed senior executives, not board members. So again, you have a similar sort of concern about reputation and also concern about cyber risk. And this is a recent survey. This is from this year. So I think this is on everybody's mind. So let me see here. What kind of timing do I have? Okay, I better move quickly. This is not as important to my discussion. I just wanted to sort of frame where cyber risk fits in the bigger picture of enterprise risk management. So in my opinion, I've just written a chapter for a new book on corporate governance, and my theme is strategic risk. And strategic risk is the kind of risk that will affect your strategy. It's pretty simple. Your operations, your strategy, and your longer-term viability as a company. And reputation risk is one of them, and cyber risk is one of them too. I think there's a nuance there that I would like to make right on this slide. I created sort of a distinction between intrinsic strategic risk and actualized strategic risk. So intrinsic is something that just by definition is a strategic risk. So reputation risk, leadership risk, culture risk, things that, for example, Volkswagen is dealing with in a big way right now. Those are things that are intrinsically strategic because they involve very important issues. Other risks, I think, become actualized strategic risks, meaning that they will impact your strategy and your business much more heavily if they are not taken care of in the first place. And I think cyber risk is really a good example of this. I think corruption risk is another good example. There's many others. Because if you're not minding your store and you're not taking care of business and you don't have the talent and the budget and the oversight and the support, then you're going to end up creating a strategic risk from your cyber risk because you haven't been minding the store and taking care of business. So I think that's an important thing to think about also as a person who maybe is running a company or on a board. Another point I want to make is that both reputation risk and cyber risk are risks that are kind of unusual in that you can't bucket them into it's an operational risk or a technology risk or a financial risk. They kind of cut across everything. They're sort of morphing, they're changing, they attach themselves to other things. So I think they are, that's why they are strategic risks very frequently, I think. Cyber risk also cuts across every function in an organization, every part of the organization. And one of the takeaways from the research that we've done for the conference board is that one seriously important way to create the right infrastructure to deal with cyber risk is to have a cross-disciplinary team of people. We heard about that this morning, actually, from Dr. Ross. People that are not just technology, not just legal. They have to all work together because these are very complex problems that have a lot of different aspects to it. And so you need to have those cross-disciplinary teams, and you also want to have cross-segmental teams. And a couple of the leading edge companies that we profiled in the research are doing that. They don't just keep it in one division. They actually cut across the businesses to work together on these issues. So I think that's really important too. All right, I'm going to skip over some of this just to get to the meat of the matter. Here's some interesting things. This is starting to, evolve when boards are starting to deal with cyber risk more seriously. What are the kinds of oversight activities that boards are engaging in? And we see that they're overseeing risk assessments and audits, the crisis management plan, the insurance requirements, budget requests. That's all very important, and it's good that that's happening. We can see quite a bit of alignment here between the IT professionals and the boards in terms of how important they think these things are. So that's good news. This is not such good news, or it's medium news, I would say. How often is cybersecurity governance reviewed? In the best practices companies that we profiled for the conference board, it's basically quarterly, if not more often. And that involves quarterly with the board, but then with the CEO, even monthly. And again, it depends also on the kind of company that you are. If you're a professional services firm, maybe it's not necessary that your CEO meets with you every month. But if you're a financial industry company or retail or healthcare, where there's a lot of sensitive data, a lot of crown jewels that need to be protected, then you want to do it much more often. Annually, 40%, quarterly, 33%. It should be at least quarterly, if nothing else, just to make sure what's going on. Cybersecurity topics on the board, again, approval of a formal security strategy and incident response plan. I think this is a really important interconnect that the board needs to be aware of, and the C-suite for sure, is the incident response crisis management piece of this. It has to be just completely integrally interconnected with the program and the strategy. Let's see. Here's a interesting, again, we see a couple of disconnects here between the IT professionals in red and the board in blue. What worries respondents most? The board worries the most about theft of high-value information like intellectual property. And they also worry very seriously about data breach involving loss or theft of customer records. The IT professionals a little less so. When we come to the third one here, cyber attack that significantly disrupts the business or IT operations, the IT people are very concerned, 33%, the board 12%. The board is thinking about the value proposition, more about the intellectual property and the crown jewels, but if you're going to have a serious disruption, that also affects them. So again, a disconnect here. These are some of the takeaways from the Ponemon survey that I've referenced a couple of times from June. They basically say that board members admit their knowledge of cybersecurity is limited. They also feel that there's a real disconnect between IT professionals and the board, and I have a suggestion for that, which is part of my takeaways from the research that I've done. IT security professionals are skeptical about the board's understanding of the risk, as they should be. Board members are overly confident about the effectiveness of their governance practices. I would agree with that too. And it took the Target breach to get a lot of people to wake up. And so these breaches are at least having the silver lining of waking people up and making people think a little bit more. So I've told you about this research. It's coming out in 2 weeks. There'll be a strategic overview document, sort of an executive summary. This is proprietary to the conference board and its members. So if you're a conference board member, you can access it. If you're not, there'll be this strategic overview. If you're interested in getting a copy of that, it'll be out in a few days. I'll be happy to take your card and send you the link, which we don't have up yet. And there'll also be a couple of summaries strictly for the chief legal officers and another one for the chief financial officers. So that's all coming out in the next few weeks. But really what we tried to do with this research was to capture what went wrong with the 5 cases that we profiled. We used some very interesting reputational risk, the people that I mentioned before. We used some of their data to look at the Target and the Anthem and some of the other breaches and what did it mean from a reputation risk standpoint. We also took some financial stock data and try to compare against what peer companies in each of those industries, like Anthem, the healthcare industry, JP Morgan, the banking industry, did the cyber incident have a stock impact? And sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't, but it's interesting to look at that stuff. Then we had the 5 cases of the global companies that wanted to show us what they governance practices were. We had a healthcare global company, we had an outsourced and computer services company, we had a global technology company, we had a global European-based financial and insurance company, and who am I forgetting about? Oh yes, we had a domestic utility, which from the infrastructure issues is hugely important. And so I think we were able to gather a lot of really good information to sort of provide what we call 10 takeaways for best or at least good practices in cyber risk governance. And I'll share 3 with you here. I'm not allowed to share all of them. The conference board put a muzzle on me. But so I think the most important one really, and I listed it 3rd here, the most important one is, we've seen all these slides about IT professionals and the board not talking to each other or not understanding each other. I really think there has to be a triangular relationship for cyber risk management and cybersecurity management. And it's the board, it's the C-suite, and it's the IT professionals. You need to have all 3 of them synchronized, talking to each other, plus a number of other things going on. But you need to have the board recognizing its oversight role and the fact that it is a really serious issue that has to be acknowledged and dealt with, even when it hasn't happened yet, although it probably did, but they didn't know it. But the board really needs to think about that and have the right kind of talent, the right kind of expertise, talking to them about these things. And the C-suite and or CEO really need to be proactive too about developing the strategy and implementing it through the right kind of talent. There's other things here. Know who your cyber actors and stakeholders are. I think that's a really important piece of the puzzle. Who's trying to enter your fortress? Who's trying to steal your crown jewels? You need to know who those are. Even if you don't really know who they are, you need to understand the methodology and the mentality of what's coming in. And then you have to really understand the stakeholder impact. Who are your stakeholders? Do an analysis of who's going to get hurt, who's got a stake in this that you need to think about. And so that's a really important piece of the puzzle. And then I think the reputation risk piece attached to cyber risk is also extremely important and should certainly be used by the professionals who are involved in doing this work in your companies and organizations. Use it as a way to get to your higher echelons and your board. This issue will have reputational consequences on the organization, on the people potentially. And frankly, many executives are targets of these things. One of the companies we profiled shared with us how for a long period of time there was a very patient penetration of their systems all the way up to the C-suite and the board getting personal records of those people. So that's something that I think rattles some pages. So let me see if there's anything else I should mention. I've mentioned that all. Oh, I do want to, very quickly, a snapshot. So to me, at the end of the day, this all goes back to building organizational resilience, and I don't mean it in a limited sense of just business continuity and crisis management and disaster recovery, although those things are clearly incredibly important. I talk about the resilient organization as one who has gotten its act together, understanding what programs it needs to have internally to meet its risks, to be a good corporate citizen, to act with integrity. But in order for those inputs to be fully deployed and create resilience, you need to have the enablers, the top green box there: governance, leadership, a strategy, and then the outputs, meaning the behaviors in the marketplace, whether it's stock price, whether it's other financial indicators, or other kinds of behaviors in the marketplace, how you conduct business and that sort of thing, will be consistent if there's that sort of synchronicity between the enablers and the inputs. But if there isn't, support from the top, for example, and the IT professionals are laboring in the orchard and nothing's happening, then you have a reputational gap that could be negative. So when and if the bad thing happens and you're not resilient, it's going to be much more serious, the impact. It's going to be much more costly. And so I think if you have that synchronicity, that triangle, certainly for cyber risk, working together, then you can create a longer-term sustainable plan. But it's a work in progress and it's complicated. And it requires good people to work together in a team-like way in order to defeat this very asymmetric situation that we have. So with that, I'll think I'm being booed off the stage or something.
That's great. So I want to thank Andrea for presenting and taking the time to come here. And Andrea is going to be here all day if you want to ask her any questions, because I know we were short on time. And also, if you want to give her a card, your card, so people can send you the link to. And
Perfect.
I wanna
It'll be
thank
out in a
you
few days.
with
Yeah.
this flag. So
Oh.
thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Very nice. Thank you.
I'd love to connect with you.
Sure.
Not only about the studies that you have, but we're actively involved in developing So when you get a chance to fire off that link, then we'll connect from there and we'll follow up.
Absolutely.
Fantastic talk. Thank
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Here you go.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Certainly, if I can get that link as well, and I'll
Sure.
take a call.
My pleasure. I'll do that. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank
Forward to
you.
hearing from you.
Okay, good. Thank you, sir.
Very nice talk, Andrea.
Thank
Very
you.
Good stuff. Do you have any extra cards to give out? You bring me cards?
Yes, I do have cards. Okay. Bunch of cards. There you go.
All right, good. Thank you.
Sure.
Very good job.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Do we know each other?
I'm not sure. I'm on the ISACA board, so
No, I don't think we do.
can I have your word?
Of course you can.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks.
If you can,
Reports, conference board. Yes, the conference board. Yeah, absolutely. I'll make sure you
so
get
please
it.
send me the card. I mean, send me your slides.
I will, absolutely. Thank you, sir. Okay, thank you. There you go. Okay.
There you go.
Okay, thanks.
wonderful
Oh,
to
I know a
see.
lot of people over here.
Oh, wonderful.
They're former colleagues of mine, actually.
Oh,
I used to work at Daylight Forensic.
Oh, wonderful.
I was their GC, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so, gosh, what's his name? He's a little bit...
Tom Bach.
Tom Bach,
Yeah, yeah,
Tom
yeah. I
Bach. Say
work
hi
with
to him.
Tom. Yeah.
He's
He's
a great
wonderful.
guy.
I work. I help him a lot with his
Sure,
practice
thanks.
area. To bring in business for
Great.
his,
Great.
you know, he's the head of our
Did I give you
A&L
one?
practice. No,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's
Yes,
wonderful.
say hi to
Okay,
him.
I will
Yeah.
definitely. Thank you. It was a
Thanks.
wonderful presentation.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I enjoyed it a lot.
Good.
It's
I
very
try to keep people
informative.
awake.
No, it's wonderful.
Thank
Perfect.
you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
a lot.
So I know you send me the let me give you a card. Because I'm the person who's putting up the deck.
Okay, great. I'll send you a PDF.
Okay, and I won't do it for 2 days.
Okay, good. I'll make sure that send
That's the one.
Oh, no. No? Okay. No. Send deck. Okay.
Hi, Andrew. Very good.
Thank you.
You do risk advisory. I do cybersecurity advisory. So I wonder if there's some synergies that
Yeah, we
that
should
could
definitely
explore.
talk. Absolutely.
Great.
Great. Thank you.
I'll be in touch. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, Jessica Robinson. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. This was really great.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. And so tell me, so your company is
GEC Risk Advisory.
Okay.
I started it almost 3 years ago.
Okay.
And, I got tired of being inside the corporations and sometimes hitting my head against the wall.
Yeah.
So now I'm doing it from the outside looking in and basically strategic governance, risk, and compliance issues. Some more tactical things like more in the compliance space in terms of creating an anti-corruption program or doing a risk assessment, compliance and ethics program evaluations, so different things. And then I do a lot of workshops and education for boards and C-suites.
awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
What do you do?
Well, I have a company that, first I'll just start off, I used to work at Target.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
so now I have a company that actually focuses on risk management for companies. And so includes looking at risk inside their physical security. So one of the things I do is risk assessment.
That's great.
But if we got together, we have a lot to talk about.
Absolutely.
So I would love
You
to
have a
get your
card?
card. I do.
Great. All right, perfect. Good. I'll know it's you.
Yes, yes.
Very smart.
Yeah, so do
Great.
you have a card? Or
Oh, I didn't give you my card. Here I am, putting my cards away.
Yeah.
There you go.
All right, wonderful. So,
How
yeah,
silly
and
of me, right?
And I'd love to get your book on
Yeah,
reputation and
there's
risk.
a link
Oh,
right there.
perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. All right, great. Thank you. So next time I see you, I'll have you sign it.
Oh, well. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I would like to
Of course.
learn as much as I can.
Oh,
Like to,
anytime.
take the link.
Great presentation.
Thank you so much.
Very useful.
Let me give you, emblem. You have your share of challenges to deal with as a health organization.
Yeah, oh, yes.
Yeah, great. You're here in, yeah.
I'm here in New York, yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay, great.
Well, Old Slip, I'm across the street
New
now,
York,
but
yeah.
I'm still in Manhattan.
Yes, yes.
You're in New York? Yeah. Great. Yeah, I moved across the street to 15 Pipewater.
Okay, okay. So what do you do over there? I didn't
I'm
know.
in IT government. Well,
IT government.
it's an old card.
Okay. So you have a different. better
I'm
role.
still in IT.
Okay.
I'm just doing, they hired a new senior director for IT government. So I'm reporting to them.
Okay, great. Sounds like you're.
Some of your stuff is very.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Very Let's see. Did I get everything?
No, jacket.
That's not mine.
You also missing this?
Oh, my plaque.
Yes.
Silly me. Thank you.
Something from the office, right?
Yeah, right. Very, very attractive.
All right, how's everybody doing? I'm gonna, yay?
Oh, wait, I was supposed to introduce you.
I'm me.
Jeez. You're you.
Okay.
I'm going to introduce me over here. Okay, so we have Jay Farron, right? He is the principal at Interactive Security Training, and as a speaker, he has presented at many events, including user groups, computer trade shows, DoD and federal conferences, ISPCon, I don't know if I'm saying that right, Tech Ed, and WPC. Jay is on the global board member of GITCA and is past president of ISACA Connecticut, past president APCUG, and is a Microsoft MVP Enterprise Security, and has been an MVP in Windows, HPC, and Azure. So take it away, Jay.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so I thought what I would do is do a deep dive. Start off with the bells and whistles. Bell and whistle. I'm looking for you. What I have on here, okay, it's saying look direct at the camera. I'm gonna stop this to show you. I've got a 3D camera. You'll start seeing these on computers coming out. Infrared, RGB, so that it looks for depth. It just doesn't look for a flat picture. So Tim says, well, I could just take a picture of Jay and it'll work. No, it won't, unless this picture's got depth in it, okay? Now, let's play the game here for a second, because it just found me. I'm logged in, life is good. We're gonna talk a little bit about Windows 10, some deep dives of security. The decks are available for everybody, so everybody knows it. When you get your evaluation, you can download decks for all the presentations, or PowerPoints. So you don't have to take 400 pictures. Okay, if you want to, you can, but you don't need to. The only thing I reference is my blog, blog.mir.net. I post a lot of security information and free books up there. Okay? This is kind of redundant. We talked about 2000 earlier, 2003, the script kiddies, 2005, it's present. Where are we going down the road? And I'd be willing to make the same statement that John Chambers makes. If your company hasn't been broken in yet, you just don't know it. There's two types of companies. Those have been hacked and don't know they've been hacked. Okay? The reality is go look at your firewall. So the question is, and I think one of the messages is, that we all agree, how many people agree that if we got rid of the users, we'd be really secure? We wouldn't have a job, but we'd be really secure. Okay? So what Microsoft did in Windows 10 is they did some things under the hood that people don't get. I'm going to give you an example of what I mean by that. The biggest thing that people get out of Windows 10, and I'm going to jump out of the deck, is the damn start menu has applications again. Because anyone who said Windows 8, all they cared was the start menu's back. Okay, yes, the start menu's back. Yes, there's still this modern thing where you can click the icons and do the things you want. But the concept here is there's a lot more under the hood that you don't recognize that I want to address. And that's kind of my mindset for today's presentation. So, okay. So think about addressing the threats, okay? Why are people doing what they're doing? And how do we eliminate some of the vectors or some of the ways that people break into our network? I.e., how do they get to the desktop? And I'll strictly talk this presentation about the desktop. Who would like to be the executive at Sony right now with all the breaches that went through with Sony and all the emails that went back and forth? What if there was a technology that would have blocked the emails from just leaving the building because they were confidential? or we classify data the way that we should classify data. That's kind of the mindset of where Microsoft is going with the operating system. By a statement, I do not work for Microsoft, so I'm going to give you my opinions. Okay? So if we look at this, we look at the challenges. How many people have just gotten to Windows 7 from that ugly XP upgrade? And it was ugly, okay? Let me be blunt. The upgrade from 7 to 10 is put a CD in or a disk in or deploy it. You don't have to uninstall and reinstall everything, okay? So first issue is identity protection, okay? How do we find out who you are? Everybody agrees. Does anyone not agree that passwords just don't work? Okay? I used an example here of two-factor authentication using my face. Okay? Now, I'm going to be blunt. There's this guy in the back of the room who's going, I can take care of that. I'm going to just take a gun and stick it to your head, and you're going to put your face next to the screen. Okay? But you know what? If he puts a gun on me, I'll give him my password very graciously and say, here you go. What would you like? Would you like me to log in for you, sir? I don't care. But the reality is, we've got to get away from it. So one of the new features in Windows 10, is this whole concept of hello, which means facial recognition, fingerprint, and also iris scanning built into the OS. Still can use smart cards, still can use the other technologies, but it's built in. You see a lot of the advertisements of, the little baby, and they say when they grow up they'll never need a password. They have their face. They don't have to learn anything else. So that concept kind of makes sense. And there's a whole bunch of devices that are coming out with these cameras now. Data protection. How do we look at protecting the data? Both at risk, data that's sitting, your laptops, your devices that are sitting, that are being stolen. Connecticut's got a new law in effect July 1st. I don't know how many people know about this one. If you are a business doing business in Connecticut and you have a breach, you must notify the state of Connecticut within 90 days. It's a misdemeanor if you don't. And you must pay for identity protection for all those people at risk. Well, if my laptops are all encrypted, it makes it a lot harder than if somebody left the laptop sitting on the floor somewhere. Okay? So how do we protect the data both in and out of the device? Threat resistance. How do we determine that the applications are trustworthy? So I'm going to play the game here. Would it be cool, perhaps, if I could make a corporate image and say only these 15 applications are the only applications that should run on that machine? And no matter where you went on the internet, no matter what you downloaded on that machine, they would not run, ever. That's built into Windows 10 in the Enterprise SKU. It's built in. This is digitally signing the software, and once that software is signed, unless the administrator goes in and changes it, guess what? That machine is locked in place. And then from a device security point of view, how do we protect the machine? From power off to use to back to power off again. At rest, at work. How do we protect the infrastructure of the machine? So let's talk a little bit about it. Right now, I would be willing to bet that almost everybody in this room is playing the reactive, they're attacking us, what are we doing? Not the proactive, what do we do to protect it? Okay? The mindset here that Microsoft did with 10 is they're adding some proactive tools that you may or may not enable that are there to give you some additional security if you want it, if you need it. I have now it's an infamous statement I've made. I don't want anyone in this room to have a resume generating event. That's when it's your watch and you're the guy in charge or gal in charge, and guess what? Go find a new job because something happened. So the idea here is, how do we do it? We've got a lot of emphasis on antivirus and anti-firewalls, but we've got to start being more proactive. So right now we use permissions, ACLs, access control lists. We put files in a folder somewhere. We use firewalls, we use antivirus. Oh wait, we might use IDS and IPS. And then it starts going down a deep hill. What if, and I'll just play the game here, in Windows 8, they added BitLocker, hard drive encryption. We added some non-admin rules. Microsoft added UACs, which absolutely no one understand what it was when it came out in Windows 7. And there's still lots of people who still don't understand what it is, which basically said in Windows XP there were 3 security levels. There was user, administrator, and system. In Windows 7 and forward, there's a 4th level called Internet. The lower running service can't talk to an upper running service without explicit permission, When you get the pop-up that says, "Hi, your system wants to," it's asking for permission to be elevated. Now, if you've architected or built your systems in a proper way, end users should never see that sign. Now, part of Microsoft's problem was they didn't notify this, and then there were some things that just didn't make any sense. I travel all the time. I want to change my time zone on my computer. I shouldn't be an administrator to do that. Now, change the time on my computer, that's a different story than changing the time zone. Okay? I want to add a printer to my computer. I don't need to be an administrator to do that, especially if you put the drivers there. But if you want to add new software, yeah, I probably do need to be an administrator. So they've done some work to filter that. App Locker, which was whitelisting, yeah, if you were really good, you might make it work, but it really wasn't very strong. And then they added IPsec. So here's what we've done. We've looked at these 4 elements of security, identity, threat management, and information protection, and we've added some new toys. Credential Guard. Let me explain this one. How many people here know what passing the hash is? Gone. So in Windows 10 Enterprise Edition, the LSA module is fundamentally, and I'm going to use some improper terms, but I'll help you understand this, virtualized to its own memory space, and then it uses PKI, 156-bit, to talk in and out. So the LSA module is protected from the hash. The hash is randomly generated to systems that understand what the hash is doing. Now, this does require that the systems you're talking to understands this newer model. Yes, it'll take time till everything happens that way, but they're doing it at the OS level now. So they're protecting the hash at the OS level. Device Guard is where I can lock the machine down. You can only run on the machine what I tell you to run. So let's see, I'm in a military base, and I don't want anybody putting anything on the machine. I don't have to worry about if they take a USB stick and put it on the machine, because it ain't going to run. And I don't care whether that USB stick is a rubber ducky or not, it still isn't going to run, because guess what? I'm only allowing what I've allowed to run and nothing else. Windows Hello is this whole concept of biometrics built into the operating system. Enterprise data protection. I'll give this a high level, I'll come back to it a little bit later. We have the way now to look at data and say, what kind of data is it, and classify it for the user. I know you could say, well, I know this data is HIPAA data, or this data is SOX data, or this data is this data, but how many of you users are actually going to do that? Oops, I forgot. We can actually find it and classify it and secure it in the fashion that the company wants it done as an automatic process. And then AMSI is all about new ways to look at threats. So multi-factor authentication in Windows 7, it was kind of ugly. I mean, you could do it. It wasn't pretty. Phishing attacks worked all the time. They still do. And, of course, passing the hash. So Credential Guard, once again, Windows Enterprise SKU. This is not the Pro version. It is in the Enterprise version. Okay? Passport is the multi-factor authentication alternative. So in Passport, you log in once, and then your Passport credential, which is a PKI infrastructure, passes information to you. Windows Hello, the biometrics. And then there's Microsoft Azure Active Directory, which is kind of interesting. If I have time, I'll demo this. If not, see me afterwards, I'll show it to you. My computer is connected to the Azure AD. I have an AD in my office. I have Azure there. When I log onto my computer on the road and I enable it, it sends me a text message on my phone, which is a PIN. I respond to the PIN, it logs me into the computer. I'll give you my password. My password is capital PASSWORD1. Everybody got it? No one's going to be able to log into my machine unless you're on my cell phone. And the PIN on my cell phone and my phone is secure. Okay? Or you can have Microsoft call me up and I have to respond back with some code. That all of a sudden takes another level. Now, if I'm sitting inside a military location and it's a knock where they're not going to let me use the cell phone, probably not going to use that level of technology. But guess what? It's there for those, for those machines that are at risk that you worry about. Okay, Credential Guard requires Windows 10,000. It requires the new UEFI BIOS. There's some virtualization extensions, and the BIOS needs to support it. So one of the things that this new UEFI, which most of the new computers have, is instead of having BIOS, it's a secured boot container. So the operating system is verified by the boot container to make sure that we don't get a rootkit inside that before the operating system builds. So let's build on top of the existing technology with some secure feature sets, okay? And then there's some firmware updates for it. For the prerequisites for Passport, we can either go key-based or we can go certificate-based authentication on top of this, okay? Once again, you can use Active Directory in federated styles. You can also use Active Directory based in the cloud or the combination of the two federations. So if, for example, you have an Office, anyone here have Office 365? Guess what? You've already got Active Directory in the cloud. So you can synchronize that Active Directory over from Office 365, and guess what? Get some extra features. Now you may say, well, you know what? I've only got 7 people who I really worry about. Okay. True story here. I have a CEO of a company in Washington, D.C. He's lost 14 laptops in the last 2 years. He puts it down at the airport and goes, hey, how are you? And by the time he comes back, it's gone. They first started with, we're going to put a hard drive encryption on it. Then they went to an RSA token for the guy. And he put the pin on the back of the RSA token, which he leaves in the laptop bag. Okay? They actually went to this. He thinks it's so cool that Microsoft calls him when he wants to log onto his computer. And his IT staff is like, okay, we're not making Microsoft think that you're really cool and special. We just are tired of you losing your laptops and not being able to log on. And guess what? He doesn't have to have a really strong password because the authentication is coming back from Microsoft based on the Active Directory. I can also set up individual pins on each machine, and the pin lives on the machine, not on other devices, so it doesn't synchronize. So the term here, passing the hashes, is kind of draw this out to kind of give you what this is all about for those of you who don't understand it. If you think about the way that we log in, we're going to pass, after we've logged in, we're going to pass our hash credentials from point A to point B. So if I want to connect to you as a server, I'm going to pass my hash to you. You're going to authenticate me on my hash, because I don't pass my password, I pass the hash. Well, if I get into the network today, and I compromise your computer, and I get your hash, then I can get to his system as you. Well, wait a minute. Are you authorized on the network? You're a user on the network, right? So you can do everything. So my system's not going to find anything wrong with you because you're a good user. You can do whatever you want, right? And you're a good user. You can do whatever you want. By the time they get to you, oh, you could be the admin. I've walked around the building looking at all the stuff that's available. How many of us have file shares that we never ever need to use, but guess what? We have access to. How many hundreds? Thousands? Okay, well, come on. Well, let's all admit, you know, the company gives us this amount of space, but when you need more space, everybody knows the P drive's got that, you know, that big chunk of stuff in it, right? Well, what this technology allows us to do is get rid of that whole concept of me grabbing your hash and then using that hash inside the infrastructure. There's a whole lot of white papers on it. Given the time constraints, I'm going to say this at a high level. Come and talk to me afterwards, and we can talk in detail. So by doing this, it's gone from being a possibility to reality. So once a user gets that token, and there are lots of tools like it, like Mimikatz, that'll do that, they're able to move around and steal other access tokens within inside the organization, and guess what? They can move around. And remember, these are now looked at as valid users. So your intrusion detection, all your systems are looking at trusted users, and you're going, well, Bill's trusted, I'm not looking at him. We should be, but we don't know how to, okay? So it enables a attacker to get in and then stay persistent inside the infrastructure, because if he keeps grabbing different tokens, as users leave and quit and move on, or different hours of the day, they can still stay inside the system for long, long periods of time. So the solution here is this new technology uses a Hyper-V type of execution to protect the NTLM tokens. You can get into the LSA, but you can't get out of it. It decouples the hash from the logon secret. At a very high level, that's what it does. It randomizes the length of the hash. For those of you who go back to early days of LM hash, 7 characters, all uppercase. LM hash version 0. By the way, there's lots of companies still running LM hash version 0. Please don't do that. Okay? So now we're randomizing the numbers. If you go into your company, if you're an auditor, go look at the LM hash levels on your server, on your workstation, and if it's LM0, anybody running a tool like Jack the Ripper can see your passwords going by like this. And just pick them off the fly. This is randomizing that information, which makes it a lot harder to do the brute force attack. This requires a Windows 10 client and a Windows Server 2012 R2 domain controller. Okay? Windows Hello, that's what we're talking about. So this is a biometric support for both face, iris, and fingerprints. Convenient login. I just look at my machine and do it. I joke about this all the time. I have my screensaver, not right now because I'm doing the presentation, set to a minute. I walk away from it, the screensaver comes on, I turn back, I look at my computer, the computer's unlocked. I never touch the keyboard. It is so convenient that I don't have to worry about, did I hit Control-Delete when I walked away from the computer? How many of you hit Control-Delete every time you walk away from your computer? You lie, you lie, you lie. Unless you have a cat card that's on your pants, and as you walk away, the string is pulling against the cat card, so as soon as you pull out the cat card, it locks your computer, or a smart card. Right? Okay? The FARR. Thank you, Robin. It's your birthday. Good. Okay. The FARR. False rejection rate of 1 in 100,000. They've actually taken this technology and taken identical twins and put them together, and guess what? One won't confuse the other one. Now, take this technology and add a little further. When I set up the camera, I can have it look just at me, or I can take the camera and say I have to move my head side to side. So now it'll pick up almost 110,000 points on my face. I don't care if you have a really good 3D printer, you're not getting that accurate today, unless you're the guys at Mission Impossible. And then you can do it. The false rejection rate is 2 to 4%, which is kind of impressive. Okay, it won't accept a school photograph. It won't accept from a Lumia 1020, which is a 41 megapixel camera. It won't go from a Surface Pro because it's looking at depth of field. So it's measuring not only what my face looks like this way, but what the distance is from the tip of my nose to here, to here, to here. And people say, well, Jay, what happens if you wear eyeglasses and you take your eyeglasses off? It's taking so many elements around my face that the 5 or 20 or 40 elements here is irrelevant compared to all the rest of them. Now somebody's like, well, what happens if your face is all bandaged up? Then use your fingerprint or another factor to log in. But guess what? Once you start using this technology, it's like, I had a password? I don't remember what the password is. I have a company who went out and bought the third-party tools because they didn't have the laptops. They didn't have laptops and devices with us, and the company changed the password policy to be 24 characters long. And they're all randomly generated, and no one knows what they are because they're all logging in with their face, and everybody is happy about it because they don't have to think about it.
How much is that camera?
This one here is the Intel developer version. It was $99. Not expensive, okay? And you will see them show up all over the place. The thing to look at, once again, about the camera is even if they're in the bezel of the computer, look for 3 little holes, okay? Or look for the word RealSense, typically. And I'll show you a list of some of the devices that are there, okay? These are devices that have it. The new Surface Pro 4 and the Surface Book also have it as well. I did this slide deck just before they did the announce. So these all have it, and there are more that are coming with it. Active Directory, I put this link up here. Remember, you'll have these PowerPoints at the end of the session when you do your surveys. You'll be able to get them. This is Microsoft Virtual Academy. I'm going to plug this one. If you're a technologist, thousands and thousands of classes that you can take for free. This one is on how to use Active Directory in the cloud or how to use it and see the features of it. Really nice way to go. Okay, so let's look at user credentials, okay? So right now, a user proves his identity. He does that by connecting to what? Some domain system, whether it be NDS or Active Directory or Azure AD or Google or Facebook or Microsoft account, okay? Then they say, trust my unique key, okay? Now, here's where it gets fun. These systems, and I'll use the example of Azure Active Directory, will send me back the token saying, I trust you. So if you were here listening to Tim today, I already have you. Everybody in the room knows what my password is, right? But you don't know what my token is. So even though you have my password, and even though the Russians have my password, they don't have my token. I can sleep at night knowing that unless you get a hold of my token, which only I know, which comes randomly and is generated every single time I log in as a different token, guess what? I'm not going to worry about my credential being stolen.
That's what the guy from LifeLock should have had
I know the CEO of LikeLike, when he first did the advertisement, he said, no one will do it. And in the first, I think it was 23 days, his identity was compromised like 40,000 times. To the point he got a new social security number. And if you've ever read the Lifeline policy, it says, we'll give you up to $1 million to help you get your identity back. Which means they'll help you write the paperwork to the Secret Service and to the police department and to all your credit card companies saying, hi, we know that their credit card was compromised. Do what you would have done if they would have written the letter to you. Okay? You know, if we spend as much money as we do today on all of those technologies, quote unquote, protecting our identity, in defending our systems, we'd be better off. I did a session with the Secret Service a week and a half ago. This year, 746 million U.S. identities have been compromised. Oh wait, there's only 240 million of us in the United States. That's 2.5 times the number of Americans have been compromised. Now, some of us have had it happen at least 5, 6, 10 times this year. Okay? And you know, and if you look at OPM and some of the others, let's see, OPM, Anthem, Target, it's out of control. Dan?
The good news or bad news, depending on how you look at it, most of us don't know that we've been compromised.
There you go. You know, we're not staying up, not realizing that we've been compromised until you get the credit card letter saying, hi, you owe us $45,000. Now, I joke about it. I travel all the time. They will call me to say, Jay, there's a problem with your credit card. And I said, but I'm telling you I'm going to be in Bahrain, so when you see a Bahrain charge, know it's me. Now, when I go back to my house, they call me up. Somebody's using your credit card in Connecticut. I said, yeah, I know I'm only there 21 days a year, but that's my home address! Because they don't get it. And wait, I'll take this one step further. Go look at your credit card statement. Go take a close look, because there's a bank that puts the full number, because it's paper, so it's not under, what do you call PCI requirements, the full number on your statement every month. Yes, thank you very much. Okay? And then I can get to my resources based on that, from the token, from these identity providers. So the idea is, let's go away from passwords. We all realize passwords are bad. Let's go away from passwords by using things like PINs, by biometrics, by phone, by leveraging some of the other technologies so we get stronger in what we're doing. Data protection. So in Windows 7 we had BitLocker. We had data protection software that kind of worked, or you needed extra things. And then you had a slow adoption from the users. In Windows 10, BitLocker has gotten better. And I've heard people say BitLocker's going away. As far as I know, they're making a big investment in BitLocker. That's hard drive encryption.
You have to upgrade the current BitLocker to, if you get Windows 10, you have to upgrade.
Well, when you're upgrading the system, it'll do all the little things. The couple of the things that changed in BitLocker 10 that's kind of nice is if you're an enterprise customer, you can either save the BitLocker keys, you've been able to save the BitLocker keys, the recovery keys in Active Directory, or if you have the M.Dot toolkit, there's a piece for it. If you're using the Active Directory Azure, you can save the recovery key up there as well. So you can put the key where you want. So they've added that to it. Now the enterprise data protection piece, that this is new and it's a work in place, allows you to actually segregate data and containerize it and encrypt it at the file level. And then put it wherever you want to put it. And I use the word wherever you want to put it. So it's HIPAA data. Yes, there's rights management, but I can actually apply rules to it. A matter of fact, I'll take this one step further. I can set up in Windows 10 right now with a VPN and set up a whitelist that says, you can use Internet Explorer to go surfing, but if you try and use Google through the VPN, I'm going to block you. I can choose what applications I'm going to allow you to work. I can also play the game of saying, if you're connected to the network with a home computer or a computer that's not joined to the domain, I can partition out what information you can use. So let's say you have Anyone here allowed to use Facebook at the office? Okay. Most people go, no, and somebody's going, yeah.
There's use and then there's access.
Okay.
You shouldn't access it.
Well, it depends on what you're doing.
Yeah.
So we can make up a rule that says while he's playing with Facebook, he can't touch any corporate data of this classification. Now, once you close down Facebook, you can touch this data. So there's some protections there based on what the data or process is. Okay? BitLocker, once again, is there. We can also do port redirection, and there's some new group policies for managing the pre-boot recovery, so that you can manage BitLocker. By the way, BitLocker not only works for the hard drive inside your computer, it also works for removable devices, like USB sticks and hard drives, so you can encrypt that data at rest. Okay? The enterprise data protection, more coming. Microsoft has Intune, that's their cloud solution. The best way to describe this is System Center in the cloud. That's got some of this functionality. Some configuration manager versions will have it later. And your MDM, your mobile device management software right now that you might be using, may actually have support for this, or they're going to bring the support in. A lot of the enterprises who are doing MDM solutions, third-party solutions, are going to bring the enterprise data protection component into their model. Rights management, okay? I can, and this has been around since Office 97. Not that anybody ever saw it, but if you went into Files, File, under your file saving options, one of the options was to protect the data, okay? And you could say, as an author, who should be able to look at your document? Yourself. Anyone else? You don't want anybody else, okay. You're a teacher, who should be able to look at the documents? Your students? Should they be able to modify them? After Friday, because they didn't do their homework, should the document go away? Because they have between Monday and Friday to do the homework, and after Friday, it's gone. Oh, sorry, you didn't do your work in time, you lose. Okay? But we could do the same thing. I'm an oil company, or I'm selling gold. The price of gold today is this, the price of gold tomorrow is something else, and I'm going to restrict that data. And I can say, as a user, you have to authenticate every time you open it up, or do it once. That's what rights management has had for a long time. Okay? Now we can protect files anywhere. Whether they're in the cloud, BYOB, devices that you have, we can protect all the file types that you have. Support for not just Microsoft. We can take this to iOS. We can take it to Android. We can take it to Mac OSs. Because wait a minute, does anyone, Microsoft would love to say, everybody should just run Windows and that's all there is, but the reality is, oh, there are Microsoft people using iPhones. So guess what? Let's make this technology work ubiquitously across the entire enterprise, or space, okay? We can apply this also to files that are saved in Mail or in OneDrive, whether it's OneDrive for Business, where you've got unlimited space, or, etc. Support for business to business, B2B, okay? And support for cloud-based scenarios like Office 365 or Office inside your environment. So you can go from an in-house cloud to a outsourced cloud to a hybrid cloud, and the technology of protecting that data at rest will still stay the same way it is. And for those who are interested, FIPS 140-2 compliant. Threat resistance. I love this line. 3,000 threats a day, blocking them through detection is a losing battle. I absolutely believe that statement. So device guard is basically locking down the computer so the applications have to be proven trustworthy before they can run. You choose what you want the application to do and what applications you want. I did a XP to Windows 7 upgrade for a company, 60,000 seats. IT said, went to IT and said, how many computers you got? And they said, 70,000. Okay. How many applications you got? We got 1,200 applications. They're all managed by ITs. Users can't put anything on their computer. I'm going, okay, if you say so. I said, how many of them won't work on Windows 7? I said, we've got like 25%, but we're mitigating that. Then I went to users and I said, can we just do inventories of like 5 machines? And in the 150 machines that we just did as a spot check, I found 5,000 applications that IT didn't know were on their machines. 13 different varieties of Photoshop, 27 versions of Adobe Acrobat, yes, Flash all over the place. No one managing this or thinking they're managing it because they had local admins who were loading stuff on machines and doing stuff, as the friend of I'll call it the gray admin help desk. With this capability, you choose as your organization, what are the applications you want to run? What do you want to run? And that's it. The demo that I show, and I just don't have the bandwidth today to do it, is I take a Windows 10 machine and I bring ransomware down on purpose. And I click on it and say run. And it doesn't run. It just sits there looking, going, I want to do something, but nothing's allowing me to do it. And it literally, think about, I hate to use the word a deep freeze, but a deep freeze for all applications that are unauthorized. But it won't let you get on that machine and change stuff. Really cool capability. This will be fundamentally one of the big game changers for malware, because it's not going to let the malware run, because the malware is not going to be signed as a solution. Now, to do this, you've got to have the enterprise SKU, and you've got to have your software signed. Today, you can sign it internally yourself. Microsoft's going to stand up a credential service that companies will be able to use. But if you're not using PKI in your organization right now, you probably should be. So what happens is, and I'm just going to build out the slide to talk it this way. There's a hypervisor that's running, or a little thin kernel of virtualization, and then the applications, this virtualized secure mode, is where the local authentication, the TPM chip is, and the applications. Then your apps are running up in here, and this is controlling all of this. And based on this process, only those machines those applications and services that are authorized will run. Period. End of story. I put this on an admin's machine, a dev's machine. Said, oh, I can fix this, and you couldn't run anything. And there are places where you won't want to do this, and there are places where you will want to do it. I can think about a kiosk. Let's say, build Toys R Us kiosks in the stores. I don't want anybody getting on the kiosk and doing anything on that kiosk, except buying toys for babies. This would be a great example. Or I'm out in the field and I've got sales reps who are using computers, and I never see the machine, and I want to make sure I protect it.
Will that fix the cash register problem too?
Yes. So fundamentally, you could use this for a cash register.
Right, to lock it out so that they can't get all the credit card numbers. By putting the software in there.
Well, what it would do is it would stop any the malware that would get on to do it. Now, if the malware is reading network traffic from somewhere else, you lose. But by doing this, if I lock this machine down to that level, and you would hand me the malware, and you would have put it on the machine, it would be like a text file. It just wouldn't run. It would just sit there going, I know you want me to do something with, but I don't know how to get it to run. So just sit there going, okay, I know the next.
Because it has to have some kind of recognition to say that file is authorized.
That executable, that DLL, that container of code is authorized to run on this system. And then at what level is it authorized to run at? So you can do those kind of things. Okay? To do this, once again, the enterprise SKU. Okay? One of the things that's been announced but not talked about yet is in Microsoft 10, there is a store. I'm going to take some thunder from Microsoft. The last number I heard is there are 110 million copies of Windows 10 right now that are running on computers, activated and running. And that's in under 90 days. Okay? Anything that runs on Windows 10 as a universal app will run on a Windows phone, will run on an Xbox, will run on an Internet of Things, if it's allowed. Same platform all across. In the Windows 10 Home and Pro versions, okay, there's a store where people can buy stuff and download stuff through the store. The business SKUs will eventually have a Microsoft Business Store that's your store. So when an employee says, I need to install X, they'll go to your business store, they'll click on it, and the business store will install the software on the computer without having to get the help desk to push software to your machine. When it's in the business store, if the business store, I'm going to say it's application J, if version 2 of J comes out and you have it on your machine, it'll automatically upgrade the version 2 of your machine, version 1 to version 2. You don't have to do anything about it. That's coming down the road, which makes it easier for enterprise customers. Yes, sir?
Can you specify what routes you trust to sign to?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if you wanted to go out and use VeriSign and buy VeriSign to sign your code, the answer is yes. There is a whole, on TechNet, a whole article about this. But the answer is, you've got to have that root in your machine inside your enterprise that you're trusting up front.
So it'll take any route in the machine that I trust routes
If it has the right level of encryption and the hashing algorithms, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not like I can go get a free, let's go and get a free root certificate, put it on a machine, and, make it work.
Good question. When you say sign your internal apps, is that only apps that we develop?
Yes.
Or if we bought some old app that we have that was pre this that we want to serve, can we do that with an app?
Could you serve an old app that somebody else did? The answer is yes. But now I'm going to ask the question, how well do you know how well behaved that old app is? And do you really want to certify that old app to run in this environment? The answer is theoretically you could. I'm going to play the game here.
Judgment call.
Right. So there's a judgment line that I use all the time that's kind of an interesting one. I actually say this, and people look at me like I'm crazy. How many of you have gone to a place or work in a place where the business department wants to buy this new technology, but they don't pay for maintenance? And you're an IT person, and you're laughing at me, right? I've actually gone to companies and said, oh, you want to buy that technology? Not a problem, that's a great idea. By the way, that's 10% a year for the next 20 years. How are you going to fund that? And they go, what do you mean? I said, when you buy a car, do you have to put new gas in it and new tires? And they go, yeah. I said, I got to do the same thing for software. How am I going to do that unless you give me the tool? And they look at me like I'm crazy, and then they walk back. And all of a sudden, they come up with the 10% a year. But no one in IT has ever asked them it that way. We've just taken it on and then, okay, I can't support it. Instead of saying, well, I'm more than glad to do it for you. And you budget that 10% every year for me, right? Why 10%? And as soon as I say that, they walk away like, he's not serious, is he? I go, uh-huh. And they go, oh, we'll fund the money. And, the IT staff that I'm doing with, that would have never worked. But we never asked them. So asking them actually will help from time to time. Okay, Windows 7, malware. So hardware-based, these new UEFI, where we're basically protecting malware from the boot sector type of issues on boot, is a real good solution. This is a trusted boot solution. Now, busy slide, I'll just play it this way. We keep adding more and more functionality down the road to make it more stable and more protective against bad people doing bad things. One of the nice things that's here, and this is Microsoft Intune is the example of where this is working, is I go and I want to authenticate to use services. Prove to me that you're healthy. Show me that the machine meets the requirements to do the request. How many of you check machines when they get on the network or VPN to make sure they're updated, patched, fixed, and meet the requirements? You do. Okay. And the rest of us are going, that would be a nice idea. Okay? So here's the concept that we've got this technology built into the OS. If you're using, for example, any of the tools, the provable PC health technologies, Intune happens to be one of them, you can now validate the machine is healthy. And if the machine isn't healthy, it'll say, go over here and get those fixes before I let you play on the network. I'm sorry you don't have an antivirus update in the last 45 days because you haven't connected your computer to the network, but when you connect it to my resources, you're going to get updated before you work.
This is a real problem with universities because they don't have the budgets to do this, and we got thousands of students logging in. When I was at Rutgers Law, we had one person bring a computer in with malware, and it infected everybody sitting in the room on the
Okay, so there's two parts to that. One, for the educational community, The pricing that Microsoft has in this stuff is really, and I teach part-time in a college, is really, really, really inexpensive. Compared to the corporate side, that side, it's a really good solution. The other question is, how much time does it take to fix once they did it? Now, I don't know if Rutgers is like a school in Massachusetts where every IP address in the school is on the public internet. Every single address. And the only reason they're changing it is because the chancellor's printer is getting bombarded right now, and they're going through 30 reams of paper of porn pictures every day, getting printed to their printer. So she's decided, we're going to take the printers and put them behind the firewall. How about putting the computers there too? Never mind. What? Yeah, with public IP addresses. I'm not going there, but we're a university. We have to experiment. That's the line. Am I wrong? Okay. So up here, I can say, I want to look at my boot, I want to look at the policies, I want to look at antivirus, I want to look at patch status, and guess what? Are you good? No. Here, get the updates. Okay, now you're good. Now you can play. Couple of things in Windows 10. One of the things that people don't know, Windows 10 comes with 2 browsers. It comes with IE 11. It will be IE 11. It will be there for a long, long time. By the way, Windows 10 is the last version of Windows that most of us in, my age, I'm an old fart, will probably see, because it's going to be around for a long time. There's not going to be a Windows 11 in a year and a half. It's going to be Windows 10, and they're going to keep upgrading it. So IE 11 is there. IE 11 has the enhanced mode so that if you have to run old applications, it'll run as IE 8. But they've got a new browser called Edge. Edge is the fastest, quickest. It doesn't have all the plugins. It doesn't have ActiveX. It's HTML5. It's quick. It's fast. It's very, very powerful. You run new applications, works great. You're running old applications, you go to IE 11. By the way, one of the things that Edge does that a lot of people doesn't know is it'll open PDF files really fast. So it's a PDF reader as well. And you can choose which one you want. So IE, if you don't want ActiveX, you've got ActiveX, or you have plugins that you've built for your company, you can still run IE 11. If the IE 11 doesn't work on your sites, and there are some places where IE doesn't work, I will give you the example of this. This is a really stupid one. I know of websites that check for the version number of the browser, the first number of the browser. So let me see, I have IE 6, IE 7, IE 8, IE 9, IE 1. Not 10, IE 1. So you see anyone ever see the message that pops up that says, get a new browser? And you're running IE 11? That's because it thinks it's IE 1. Sounds stupid, okay? There's an enterprise mode that you can set up on my blog. It's got it also on Microsoft, where you can say to the browser, pretend you're IE 8. Tell the web server you're IE 8, and the web server goes, oh, I know what to do now. Sounds silly, but that's what it is. So what? Yeah, there's a new Office for Mac. What? There's a new Office for Mac. I'm not a Mac guy, so okay. Now, there is a new interface inside of the malware system. Okay, it's called the Advanced Malware Scanning Interface. This allows for scanning, but it also allows for third parties to build tool sets for this. You're going to see a lot of extra tools showing up here in this space. Now, I do want to talk about something that drives me crazy. Anyone here put Windows 10 on a computer yet? How many of you have seen the screen and clicked Use Express Settings? Okay? If you read in the press, Microsoft is stealing all your privacy. That's because you didn't read the screen that said, hey, if you don't want to share all your stuff with Microsoft, don't choose this, choose this. Oh, never mind. Okay? But people just click, 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 and didn't read it. And then guess what? Let's go backwards and turn off all the things I don't want to share with Microsoft. Now, I'm going to be blunt. There are some things that I use with Microsoft I absolutely love. I'll show you a demo of that in a second. By the way, in the next builds of Windows 10, and if you're on the insider rings, you'll start seeing this, guess what? they're bringing up screens that look more like this, to shove it in your face, to say, "Are you really sure? Choose what you want to share with Microsoft. Choose more of what you want to share with Microsoft." So these are the later builds. If not, you actually have to go back and say, turn this off, 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 what do you want to share? So you can choose what you want to share and not share. Now, one of the things that Windows 10 has in it is Cortana. Cortana is, quote unquote, the digital assistant. I live by Cortana. Okay? It's Soorry on intelligence. And I'm going to do this as a demo because I think it's a cool demo. Assuming I'm connected to the internet, and I'll just check, make sure I'm connected. Good. What's the weather going to be tomorrow, and do I need a raincoat?
The forecast for tomorrow shows mostly sunny skies with a high of 63 and a low of 55.
I want you to think about one thing, folks. Where am I? It figured out I was in New York. It then figured out what the weather was going to be in New York. It wasn't just, where's Jay? Do I need a raincoat? It told me where. It'll look in my calendar and say, Jay, you have a flight tomorrow at 5 o'clock. It's now 3 o'clock. The traffic between where you are right now and the airport is pretty bad. You should leave in the next 5 minutes. Or my favorite one, Jay, your wife, what do you call it? Your wife's birthday is today. Stop by the florist, and then because I have it on my phone, it says, Jay, the nearest florist is a block away. So with that, I'm going to thank you guys very much. Give it the time. Come and ask questions afterwards.
Yes. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, you'll be around all day anyway.
Yes,
Okay.
I will be around all day.
Yesterday. So Jay was one of the instructors yesterday. He got his plaque yesterday, and then he came back today. So we appreciate it. Thank you.
They're going to break this room up. Folks, if you'll step out of this room, go in the hallway. They're probably setting up food for you. They're going to break this wall down. Yes, so they can make the rooms together.
Nice presentation, Jay. Thank you very
Thanks.
much. Quick question for you. The last item with Cortana. Now, did you have to train it to do that? Did you
No.
have to this is
Come on over here.
without this is
Come on over
without
here.
training.
Watch this. Now, I have not trained this just to use my phone. So I'm going to click here, ask it a question.